many years ago, about a decade ago. And at that point, the whole idea of thinking of morality as kind of purely a brain thing is relatively new. And certainly the idea of philosophers working with fMRI machines, that was super new. But now here we are 10 years later, and some updates. First of all, Josh Green.
So in the long stream of time, I assume now you have 3 giraffes, 2 bobcats, and children?
Yeah, so 2 kids, and we're close to adding a cat.
We talked to him again. He has started a family. He's switched labs from Princeton to Harvard. But that whole time, that interim decade, he has still been thinking and working on the trolley problem.
Did you ever write the story differently?
Absolutely. So
for years, he's been trying out different permutations of the scenario on people. Like, okay, instead of pushing the guy off the bridge with your hands, what if you did it but not with your hands?
So in one version, we asked people about hitting a switch that opens a trap door on the footbridge and drops the person. In one version of that, the switch is right next to the person. In another version, the switch is far away. And in yet another version, you're right next to the person, and you don't push them off with your hands, but you push them with a pole.
Ooh.
And to cut to the chase, what Josh has found is that the basic results that we talked about,
that's roughly held up.
Still the case that people would like to save the most number of lives, but not if it means pushing somebody with their own hands or with a pole for that matter. Now, here's something kind of interesting. He and others have found that there are 2 groups that are more willing to push the guy off the bridge. They are Buddhist monks and psychopaths.
I mean, some people just don't care very much about hurting other people. They don't have that kind of an emotional response.
That would be the psychopaths, whereas the Buddhist monks, presumably, are really good at shushing their inner chimp, as he called it, and just saying to themselves,
you know, I'm aware that that killing somebody is a terrible thing to do, and I feel that, but I recognize that this is done for a noble reason, and therefore it's okay.
So there's all kinds of interesting things you can say about the trolley problem as a thought experiment, but at the end of the day, it's just that. It's a thought experiment. What got us interested in revisiting it is that it seems like the thought experiment is about to get real. That's coming up right after the break.
This is Amanda Darby, calling from Rockville, Maryland. Radiolab is supported, in part, by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, enhancing public understanding of science and technology in the modern world. More information about Sloan at www.sloan.org.
Hi, I'm Robert Krulwich. Radiolab is supported by GiveWell. This time of year, many people want to give back, but it's hard to know where your donation will do the most good. GiveWell was founded by dedicated donors who wanted to answer this hard question. Their team does in-depth, detailed research to identify evidence-backed, cost-effective programs helping the poorest people in the world. Since GiveWell's launch, it has helped more than 60,000 donors give confidently and has directed over $300 million to the charities it recommends. Visit givewell.org to learn how you can do the most good with your donation. Hi, I'm Robert Krulwich. Radiolab is supported by ZipRecruiter. You know what's not smart? Job sites that overwhelm you with tons of the wrong resumes. Now, there is a smarter way at ZipRecruiter.com/Radiolab. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology finds the right people for you and actively invites them to apply. So it's no wonder that ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the U.S. based on Trustpilot ratings of hiring sites over 1,000 reviews. And right now, Radiolab listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/Radiolab. That's ZipRecruiter.com/RADIOLAB.
When you fall for opera, you fall hard. It's not really because of the plots, the sets, or the spectacle of it all. It's because of these little perfect moments. The arias. I'm Rhiannon Giddens. The Aria Code is a new podcast that reveals the magic of opera, one aria at a time. You may not understand the words, but I guarantee you'll feel them. Listen to Aria Code wherever you get your podcasts.
Jad Robert Radio Lab. Okay, so where we left it is that the trolley problem's about to get real. Here's how Josh Green put it.
You know, now as we're entering the age of self-driving cars, this is like the trolley problem now finally come to life.
Oh, this car is coming! Oh!
The future of the automobile is here.
Oh, this car is...
Autonomous vehicles. It's here.
Build this!
First self-driving Volvo will be offered to customers in 2021.
Oh, where's it going?
This legislation is the first of its kind, focused on the car of the future that is more of a supercomputer on wheels.
Oh, is the car coming?
Okay, so self-driving cars, unless you've been living under a muffler, they are coming. It's going to be a little bit of an adjustment for some of us.
Hit the brakes, hit the brakes.
But what Josh meant when he said it's the trolley problem
Come to life.
is basically this. Imagine this scenario.
The self-driving car now is headed towards a bunch of pedestrians in the road. The only way to save them is to swerve out of the way, but that will run the car into a concrete wall and it will kill the passenger in the car. What should the car do? Should the car go straight and run over, say, those 5 people, or should it swerve and kill the one person?
That suddenly is a real-world question.
If you ask people in the abstract,
Like, what theoretically should a car in this situation do?
they're much more likely to say
I think you should sacrifice one for the good of the many.
they should just try to do the most good or avoid the most harm.
So if it's between 1 driver and 5 pedestrians,
Logically, it would be the driver.
Kill the driver.
Be selfless.
I think it should kill the driver.
but when you ask people, forget the theory.
Would you want to drive in a car that would potentially sacrifice you to save the lives of more people in order to minimize the total amount of harm? They say no.
I wouldn't buy it. No. Absolutely not.
That would kill me in it? No.
So I'm not gonna buy a car that's gonna purposely kill me.
Hell no. I wouldn't buy it.
For sure, no.
I'll sell it, but I wouldn't buy it.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
So there's your problem. People would sell a car and an idea of moral reasoning that they themselves wouldn't buy. And last fall, an exec at Mercedes-Benz face planted right into the middle of this contradiction.
Welcome to Paris, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and welcome to the 2016 Paris Motor Show, home to some of the most beautiful cars in the world.
Okay, October 2016, the Paris Motor Show, you had something like 1 million people coming in over the course of a few days. All the major car makers were there.
Here is Ferrari. You can see the LaFerrari Aperta, and of course the new GT4C Russo T.
Everybody was debuting their new cars. And one of the big presenters in this whole affair was this guy.
In the future, you'll have cars where you don't even have to have your hands on the steering wheel anymore, but maybe you can watch a movie on the head-up display, or maybe you want to do your emails. That's really what we are striving for.
This is Christoph von Hugo, a senior safety manager at Mercedes-Benz. He was at the show, sort of demonstrating a prototype of a car that could sort of self-drive its way through traffic.
In this E-Class today, for example, you've got a maximum of comfort and support systems.
You'll actually look forward to being stuck in traffic jams, won't you?
Oh, of course, of course.
He was doing dozens and dozens of interviews through the show, and in one of those interviews, unfortunately this one we don't have on tape, he was asked, what would your driverless car do in a trolley problem type dilemma, where maybe you have to choose between one or many, and he answered, quote,
If you know you can save one person, at least save that one.
if you know you can save one person, save that one person.
Save the one in the car.
This is Michael Taylor, correspondent for Car and Driver magazine. He was the one that Christoph von Hugo said that to.
If you know for sure that one thing, one death can be prevented, then that's your first priority.
Now, when he said this to you,
This is producer Amanda Ronchek.
did it seem controversial at all in the moment?
In the moment, it seemed incredibly logical.
I mean, all he's really doing is saying what's on people's minds, which is that
No, I wouldn't buy it.
who's going to buy a car that chooses somebody else over them? Anyhow, he makes that comment, Michael prints it, and a kerfuffle ensues.
Save the one in the car, that's Christoph von Hugo from Mercedes.
But then when you lay out the questions, you sound like a bit of a heel because you want to save yourself as opposed to the pedestrian.
Doesn't it ring, though, of like just privilege?
It does, yeah, it does.
Wait a second. What would you do? It's you or a pedestrian. And it's just, I don't know anything about this pedestrian. It's just you or a pedestrian, just a regular guy walking down the street.
Screw everyone who's not in a Mercedes.
And there was this kind of uproar about that. How dare you drive these selfish, make these selfish cars? And then he walked it back and he said, no, what I mean is that just that we have a better chance of protecting the people in the cars, so we're going to protect them because they're easier to protect. But of course, there's always going to be trade-offs.
Yeah.
And those trade-offs could get really, really tricky. And subtle. Because obviously these cars have sensors.
Sensors like cameras, radars, lasers, and ultrasound sensors.
This is Raj Kumar. He's a professor at Carnegie Mellon.
I'm the co-director of the GM CMU Connected and Autonomous Driving Collaborative Research Lab.
He is one of the guys that is writing the code that will go inside GM's driverless car. He says, the sensors at the moment on these cars
still evolving.
Pretty basic.
We are very happy if today we can actually detect a pedestrian, can detect a bicyclist, a motorcyclist. Different vehicles have different shapes, sizes, and colors.
But he says it won't be long before
you can actually know a lot more about who these people are.
Eventually, they will be able to detect people of different sizes, shapes, and colors. Like, oh, that's a skinny person, that's a small person, tall person, black person, white person, that's a little boy, that's a little girl. So forget the basic moral math. Like, what does a car do if it has to decide, oh, do I save this boy or this girl? What about 2 girls versus 1 boy and an adult? How about a cat versus a dog? A 75-year-old guy in a suit versus that person over there who might be homeless? You can see where this is going. And it's conceivable the cars will know our medical records. And back at the car show,
we've also heard that term car-to-car communication.
Well, that's also one of the enabling technologies in highly automated driving.
Mercedes guy basically said in a couple of years the cars will be networked. They'll be talking to each other. So just imagine a scenario where cars are about to get into accidents, and right at the decision point, they're conferring. Well, who do you have in your car? Me, I got a 70-year-old Wall Street guy, makes 8 figures. How about you? Well, I'm a bus full of kids. Kids have more years left. You need to move. Well, hold up. I see that your kids come from a poor neighborhood and have asthma, so I don't know.
So you can basically tie yourself up in knots, wrap yourself around an axle. We do not think that any programmer should be given this major burden of deciding who survives and who gets killed. I think these are very fundamental, deep issues that society has to decide at large. I don't think a programmer eating pizza and sipping Coke should be making that call.
How does society decide? I mean, help me imagine that.
I think it really has to be an evolutionary process, I believe.
Raj told us that 2 things basically need to happen. First, we need to get these robocars on the road, get more experience with how they interact with us human drivers and how we interact with them. And 2, there need to be industry-wide summits.
No one company is going to solve that.
This is Bill Ford Jr. of the Ford Company giving a speech in October of 2016 at the Economic Club of D.C.
And we have to have, because could you imagine if we had one algorithm and Toyota had another and General Motors had another? I mean, it would be, well, obviously you couldn't do that.
Because what if the Tibetan cars make one decision and the American cars make another?
So we need to have a national discussion on ethics, I think, because we've never had to think of these things before, but the cars will have the time and the ability to do that.
Lieber Kollege, wo ist es Pasta?
So far, Germany is the only country that we know of that has tackled this head-on.
Deswegen ist einer.
One of the most significant points the Ethics Commission made is that autonomous and connected driving is an ethical imperative.
The government has released a code of ethics that says, among other things, that self-driving cars are forbidden to discriminate between humans in almost any way. Not on race, not on gender, not on age, nothing.
These shouldn't be programmed into the cars.
One can imagine a few clauses being added in the Geneva Convention, if you will, of what these automated vehicles should do. A globally accepted standard, if you will.
How we get there, to that globally accepted standard, is anyone's guess. And what it will look like, whether it'll be a coherent set of rules or rife with the kind of contradictions we see in our own brain, that also remains to be seen. But one thing is clear.
Oh, this car is coming! Oh! Oh, there's cars!
Oh, there are cars coming
Bill, this...
with their questions.
Put me back for me controlling it. Oh, dear Jesus. I could never. Oh, where's it going? God damn, Bill. Oh, my God.
Okay, we do need to caveat all this by saying that the moral dilemma we're talking about in the case of these driverless cars is going to be super rare. Mostly what'll probably happen is that, like, the plane loads full of people that die every day from car accidents, well, that's just going to hit the floor. And so you have to balance the few cases where a car might make a decision you don't like against the massive number of lives saved.
I was thinking actually of a different thing. I was thinking, even though you dramatically bring down the number of bad things that happen on road, you dramatically bring down the collisions, you dramatically bring down the mortality, you dramatically lower the number of people who are drunk coming home from a party and just ram someone sideways and killing 3 of them and injuring 2 of them for the rest of their lives. Those kinds of things go way down. But the ones that remain are engineered, like they are calculated, almost with foresight.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the difference, and this is just an interesting difference. Like, oh, damn, that's so sad that happened. That guy got drunk and da-da-da. Maybe he should go to jail. But you mean that the society engineered this in? That is a big difference. One is operatic and seems like the forces of destiny, and the other seems mechanical and pre-thought through.
Premeditated.
And there's something dark about a premeditated expected death, and I don't know what you do about that. Like, everybody's on the hook for that.
In the particulars, it feels dark. It's a little bit like when, should you kill your own baby to save the village? Like, in the particular instance of that one child, it's dark. But against the backdrop of the lives saved, it's just a tiny pinprick of darkness. That's all.
Yeah, but you know how humans are. If you argue back that, yes, a bunch of smarty pantses concocted a mathematical formula which meant that some people had to die, and here they are. They're many fewer than before. A human being, just like Josh would tell you, would have a roar of feeling and of anger and saying, how dare you engineer this in? No, 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 no.
And that human being needs to meditate like the monks to silence that feeling, because the feeling in that case is just getting in the way.
Yes and no. And that may be impossible unless you're a monk, for God's sake.
See, we're right back where we started now. All right, we should go.
Chad, you have to thank some people, no?
Yes. This piece was produced by Amanda Aron.